The album Duke still had some progressive rock type tracks like Duke's Travels and Duke's End. They're at the end of the record, and there's actually a theme that they're using in both those songs that appear from Tony Banks throughout the record, so that sort of ties it together a little bit. But then you have a track like Misunderstanding, the 6/8 track, which to me sounds like an American adult-orientated rock band. I mean, you know, if you hadn't heard Phil's vocals on Then There Were Three, you might think this was a different band altogether at that point.
Now it's not like me to say the right thing. She could have called to let me know.
In a sense, they were very lucky that they didn't alienate their old audience completely and utterly. I'm sure they alienated some of them. A lot of people will have gone and bought Peter Gabriel records or Steve Hackett records, but somehow they managed to keep the essence of their Genesis fan base, and then with these type of new material like Follow You Follow Me and Misunderstanding, you know, which was a single, and they took it to a different place and it worked.
I don't know whether that was because Phil Collins was taking the reins more, or what he was going through in his life at the time. I mean, you definitely get a feel on Duke that he was a troubled man, you know, relationship. It comes across in the songs, and you know, it's a fantastic album. But it definitely, again, it's like definitely on the crossover. You know, one song's this and one song's that. It's sort of struggling to find itself, but at the same time, a fantastic piece of art.
It's just such a constant thing with us, you know. It's never been any kind of big changes. I think people perceive it in various ways, the way that it's sort of they've come across the band or not, you know. So it's really, you know, we never feel we sort of re-emerge or anything, you know. It's just kind of things sort of happen, and we just do a new album, and the people kind of like will decide that we've done something, but we've just done another album.
Right. I think one of the most important things is that we've always been kind of unaffected by trends and fashions in music, really, and we've always really made the music we want to make, and consequently we're not subject to those kind of changes that most bands go. I mean, bands come, have hits, go, and so that kind of situation changes. The turnover is quite quick. But with bands, I mean, we were one of the last bands, for instance, to come out of the club, college, university circuit. After that, it was all downhill. That singles started becoming very, very important. Whereas with us, we actually built up the following throughout many, many years.
It is diverse, it has to be. I mean, especially when you've got like Phil Collins, who's coming more to the fore as a writer, you've got Tony Banks, who's always been there, and Mike Rutherford, who's kind of, I guess, finding himself as the lead man on the guitar, but also trying to integrate that as much into the music and try not to overplay as a lead player. You're going to get this change. You know, you're going to get a lot of diversity there, because when you bring something new into something, other things around it react to what's coming in there, and so you kind of get a bit of a mixture. You get different shades, whereas some of the albums before definitely had a colour. I think the Duke album had many colours, as it was stretching either way, you know.
The song Turn It On Again, which was a successful single for them, has this sort of weird mixture of, you know, pop song mixed with, has a bar of 5/4 in it. It's got 2 bars of 4 and then a bar of 5/4, which gives you 13 beats if you take them all apart, like 13 crotch shots. But what they did was they accented the extra beat. So the ear doesn't think that you're playing an extra beat. It doesn't feel like you're playing an extra beat because it hears an accent. And what's going on there is over the B, you've still got the B root going, you've got an E major to an A major to an E major to a B major to an F sharp major. And then still, it goes to a G, to an A, to a D, to an A, to a G, all against this. And that's very typical of Genesis. It's a keyboard thing more than a guitar thing. So, you know, if we were doing this live, I'd be playing, and the keyboard playing da 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 against it, and that's, as I said, a very typical Genesis sound, and it's a sort of prog rock thing as well. You know, where you're using these sort of chords. It's a sort of climbing thing. I suppose Rick Wakeman was somebody who used to use it. Yes, used to use things like this. King Crimson, Gentle Giant. So it's typical of that style of music, but very much a Tony Banks sound here, really. And one that if I was to say, or if you were to ask me what is a typical Genesis sound, I would have to say this.
The extra beat in there kind of gives it that idea that it's skipping and starting again all the time. It's like it's almost like you come to the end of a line and it's starting again. It's like shocking you into the beginning of the riff each time. It doesn't go straight. It goes straight, then kind of jerks you back, you know. And that's a very effective use of it, especially with the way that Phil drums and the way that the song goes. It gives you that sort of da-da-da-da, almost something which provokes the brassy sound on the song. It gives you that the ability to sort of put some stabs in there, you know. Da-da.
We just tended to find we used time signatures more for, I mean, they weren't consciously weird. They just tended to be. It just tended to be how they ended up. You know, we tended to make certain sort of, particularly when we were writing in 7 or something, sound very natural. I think in you know, in some of our early songs like Dance on a Volcano or Back in New York City and things, where these, you know, you don't even, I don't think most people would think of them being a weird signature at all.
Starts with a tick, tock, tock, tick, you know, the sort of, and it fades in to the drum machine. It starts, you know, as a soundscape, basically, very sort of chilled out, and then, you know, turns into a song about 3 minutes into the song, you know. And that's typical Genesis, sort of concert material, really, you know, as opposed to a single.
I remember seeing them doing that in a concert before I'd actually heard the album. I think they were using that, and it's a very ping-pongy sound. It's kind of really, it's got quite a relaxing frequency. It sort of sets you up for something big to come in there, you know, and it's kind of very hypnotic. It's a very hypnotic sound, and when you introduce the full-on sound of the band, the full-on Genesis sound to that, the contrast is fantastic.
Times were good. She never thought about the future. She just did what she would. Oh, but she did.
I think it really works as a really empty hall, with like a thin scaffolding, just so everything can suddenly be filled up. And it goes, when I think of that album, that sort of that drum machine sequence with the shakers on it as well. It's like really, it's part of it. You know?
We use drum machines a lot, yes. It tends to start off that way because we write a lot of the songs nowadays in order to sort of free Phil up so that he's not sort of stuck behind a kit all the time, and he can sort of like improvise vocals while he's improvising other things, you know. And therefore you get little snatches of melody coming in sometimes. It means that if you start off with a rhythm machine, then, you know, we've got the rhythm going. And always by the end, we're so used to the rhythm machine thing, we've kind of written all our parts kind of with it, that it normally still becomes quite a strong feature in the end, obviously. Some songs, though, it disappears, and other songs we prefer not to use it at all. I mean, sometimes you don't want to have that totally tied to a sort of thing.
Tony Banks has said that when they got given drum machines, everything changed for them, and you can sort of see it because they use the drum machines quite musically. They don't just use it. I mean, why have a drum machine when you've got Phil Collins who plays drums in your band? So they use it to create different styles of music, allow them to do something a little bit more using sequencers and drum machines locked together, and then being able to play more sonically interesting little sort of soundscapes over the top of them, which of course they were known for, but it took it to a different place.
With rhythm machines, I mean, when I use it on my own, I tend to write kind of sort of songs on the thing, you know, rather than just looping single rhythms, you know, which is what we tend to do. I think we tend to find we do a lot of that because of the way we're improvising. You know, you leave one thing set up a long time, and then you get used to having that going all the time, right. Hypnotic quality. But it does tend to, you tend to find you're always in 4/4 for that reason, and you're locked very much into a sort of similar mood, which is fine. But I mean, I do like the, you know, I sometimes feel one needs to consciously make a decision to not do that sometimes, you know, and to try and get away from it a little bit, because, you know, I think since we've been using rhythm machines, which has really started on the album Duke, you know, the kind of weird time signatures tend to have gone out the window.
I think Duke is actually a well-crafted record. I think it's well put together, and I think because it already made, then there were 3, and that discovered that they could do it. So when they got to Duke, they had confidence. You know, they hadn't been lambasted by their audience. They all play great, and it's all heartfelt and beautifully produced, bit experimental in places, and quite commercial. So it's not, however, amongst Genesis fans, although it was a #1 record, the most loved record. And it's sort of weird, it sort of sits in a place by itself, although it was very successful.
To be perfectly honest, I overlooked it myself, and I was a huge Genesis fan. I don't know why, whether it was just a part of my life that I was going through and moved on to something else temporarily. I think it is possible that it was overlooked, yeah, or didn't get the credit it deserved, because it is, looking back at it, it's one of the finest works, I believe. It's a fantastic album.
Who guided you this far? All you know and all you feel. Nobody must know my name.
I love the drama of the guide vocal track, and which is only a short piece, but I just love the melody and the words. The desperation in there is just fantastic. I think it kind of, to me, that like, it's like the glowing heart of the album. Everything else moves around it, and there's some fantastic songs on that album. And also Duke's End, which reprises that, which I've just mentioned. You know, this fantastic instrumental then builds up to this climax, and then he brings them words of the sadness of that comes really back in, and it's really, really dramatic. And I think it's one of the finest moments in Genesis, personally. What they captured there was very, very special, very intense, very emotional, and I bet the take that they did, they couldn't have redone it like that as well, because it's just amazing. I mean, and that's like one song which is in 2 parts that is a massive highlight for me, really. But then again, there's some really desperate love songs about maybe some of the divorces they were going through or whatever was going on in their life. It certainly speaks volumes on the album. You can sense it.
To my mind, and this may sound like I'm knocking them, but I'm not, Barbra Streisand fans and Neil Diamond fans could relate to Duke far more than fans of Trespass or Nursery Crime could. So they moved in a different direction, taking a lot of their audience with them, but lost some as well, like myself, because I no longer felt comfortable with where they were in the market.
She never thought about the future. She just did what she would. Oh, but she really cared about her music. When it all seemed so important then. But she dreamed of the time when she performed, when everyone would cry for more. When all she had to do was step into the light, for everyone to start to roll.
Musically, there are some interesting things going on, which are not what you would normally hear instantly on other people's records of the time. So from that point of view, yes, I do like it. I don't think, for me though, it's the album I like the most of theirs. And in fact, in many senses with Genesis, for me, I like bits of different records as opposed to complete records. And in a sense, that's a little bit of the way the band are. You can dip into a record, and like one track like Misunderstanding on Duke is, you know, very much a rock thing. And then Duchess is a soundscape with a song at the end of it. And then Alone Again Tonight, you know, is a real, you know, what you were going to hear from Phil Collins further down the road on his solo stuff.
I think possibly Duke was ahead of its time. It's definitely, when you look back at the history of the band, you can see how important that album was. You can see the power, the emotion of what was going on. The band was changing all the time, you know, from 1975 onwards. You know, it was like shifting, and then there were 3 came on. Suddenly it was more popular in the mainstream, and then, you know, Duke came as it was an echo of the past and an echo of the future, which was, I'm sure, like ahead of a lot of the stuff that was out at the time.
Every time that she performed, when
Genesis were like, they were master craftsmen, I guess they still are. They were writing the book, you know, and a lot of people would follow. So I think it probably is, in retrospect, a more appreciated album than it was at the time, yeah. And for me personally, it is definitely.
They were much more part of the mainstream now. Good luck to them, great, but they were no longer what they were. Genesis, as I knew them, Genesis as the fans in the early days knew them, had been put quietly to bed and left to slumber. There was a new Genesis that had been born with Phil Collins at the front, and they were going in a much more mainstream direction and very comfortably doing it as well.
There was a Genesis in '67, you know. There was a Genesis in '72, there's a Genesis in '76. But, you know, you and I, you don't read the same kind of books that you used to read when you were, you know, 15 years ago. You don't dress the same way, you don't listen to the same kind of music, and nor do we. And so we are changing as everybody else is changing.
Oh, I know you're going, but I can't believe it's the way that you're leaving. It's like we never knew each other at all. It may be my fault. I gave you too many reasons being alone when I didn't want to. I thought you'd always be there. I almost believed you.
The first time we ever did drop in on drums was the album Abacab. Because we did reckon on Abacab itself, the song that we kept it, in fact, for the keyboard parts, because the take we did, just the end part in particular, worked really well with the keyboards, and the drums, they weren't very good, and so we had to kind of drop the drums in from there. And but nowadays, you know, dropping in and even dropping out drums is sort of like quite a common occurrence. It's not because of the new studios and things that can do that.
Well, you keep telling me I got everything. You say I got everything I want. And you keep telling me you're gonna help me. You're gonna help me, but you don't. But now I'm in too deep. You see this coming so that I just can't sleep. Ooh, get me out of here. Please get me out of here. Just help me, I'll do anything.
I know people say we're more commercial now than we used to be, but I still think if Invisible Touch had come out in 1970, it would have got probably the same sort of reaction that Trespass, which came out that time, did as well. There's a similarity to them in some sense that although it's a slightly more straightforward in some ways, I think we make it appear more straightforward just because of all the stuff we've done in between. And, you know, we've been part, I think, of shaping I mean, I think we've been part of shaping quite a lot of sort of what other English groups have done over the years too. I mean, I think that tends to happen, and therefore what you do becomes more commercial.
But I think we've always been like it's this old combination thing. People find it hard to understand. And it's the combination of the different talents that you put them together and you come out with this strange element that is, it's like cooking actually. That's like Genesis, and no one can control it, and people seem to say, you know, what's the next album, what are you planning? And it's not like that. We just go in and we start banging around and things come out, and we can't control it. It's monster out of control.
Well, I've been waiting here so long, but thinking nothing could go wrong. Well, now I know she has the built-in ability to take everything she sees, and now it seems I'm falling for her. She seems to have invisible touch, and she reaches in and grabs right hold of your heart. She has an invisible touch. Oh, she seems to have an invisible touch. Yeah, she seems to have an invisible touch. Oh,
That was fantastic. Wasn't it fantastic?
Right.
It was really fantastic.
When Phil left, they were looking for a replacement and contacted Virgin Records, the record label, for some suggestions. And I was signed to Virgin with Stiltskin. And I would imagine that I was one of the options they put forward to Genesis. I didn't know anything about this, but this apparently was happening in the background. People like me, I believe even artists as far out as Brian Ferry were put forward for it, which is a kind of bizarre one. But they listened to my voice on CD and thought that it could work.
I got a phone call. I got a telephone call about 18 months ago now from the band's manager asking me to join, not to audition for the band actually. And during the audition, Mike and Tony had written some pieces of music, and they got me in. There I was with the members of Genesis who I'd idolized for many years, and they said, "Okay, here's some music. Now sing something." Now they didn't tell me what to sing. They just said, "Sing something." There's always been a divide in my
It was a very strange experience. I mean, I remember I got the call in the morning and I'd been sitting making my breakfast, you know, cornflakes and a cup of coffee. And then the phone rings and Tony Smith, the manager, contacts me and says, I represent Genesis and we were wondering if you could come down and audition, you know. And at first I thought, is it April the 1st? And turned out to be real. So I think, to be honest, once I started singing some of the tracks, the older tracks, it made sense, really, because there's a lot of qualities that I have in my voice that kind of fit certainly the earlier years of Genesis, you know, and you could hear it working, especially when I was auditioning some of the older tracks with the original backing tracks, and I had sometimes I had Phil Collins doing harmonies in my ears and stuff. It was a very strange experience. I think Tony Banks said, you know, that in interviews he'd said, I knew after about half a song that this was the right person, which is quite a nice compliment to get. I don't know how he feels now, but yeah, it worked. You know, I think you either do it or you don't. You know, there's no in between.
Remember those outside in the cold and the wind and the rain. And take in your hand a little ray of light and turn into a beam that pierces the darkness of the night.
I didn't really know what I was in the beginning. To be honest, my instincts told me not to get involved, I have to say, and I ignored them. And I can look back on it and see that now, because I'd just finished recording an album of my own, which was the first thing I'd done after Stiltskin. I was feeling very good about it, feeling very creative about it. I had a deal organised for it, and I kind of abandoned ship to do the Genesis gig. And I'll never know to this day whether it was the right thing to do or not, but I certainly don't regret it. You know, it was a great experience, and we had a lot of good shows together, and we did a few good songs as well. So I certainly don't regret it. Whether it was the right thing to do, I don't know. I'll never know. Calling All Stations as an album, I think, was a good start, is how I would describe it. I didn't like all of it, no. There's certain songs I didn't really enjoy very much. But there were other songs that I thought were fantastic, and like the song Calling All Stations is a great example of it. I would say that's one of their great tracks. I would say that. And there's one or two others as well on that album, but it would be difficult to know where to put it in the all-time greatest Genesis records. I think maybe fans would be better placed to do that.
There's a tingling in my arms, and there's a numbness in my hands. All the broken promises, all my good intentions don't add up to very much, and I realize whatever happened.
I thought it was a very good start. I got involved creatively quite late on in the project, so I ended up writing a few songs with them, 3 of which they used on the album. But I think if we'd started the process together, having had the experience of touring together, understanding each other's characters a bit more, and then started a project which we were going to do for the second album, I think if we'd done this, it would have been a better album than Calling All Stations. But then again, it's one of those things you never know. But I always felt that way. I felt the best was yet to come, and sadly it never happened.
1 second at a time.
I don't know what sentiments Mike and Tony have about that album. I guess, you know, with every project you do the best you can do at the time, and some people will like it, some people won't, you know. I think it was unfortunate. I think the most unfortunate thing for Calling All Stations was the timing of it. We took, obviously, someone as prolific as Phil Collins out of the band, put someone like me in who was far less well known, and we released it. I remember we released the first single, which was Congo, and we did it, which I never agreed with, releasing that as a single personally, but we released that as the first single, and it was at a time when radio was changing a great deal. A few years before Radio 1 would play Genesis. At that time, Radio 1 had kind of abandoned Genesis and abandoned anything that was regarded as a little older. So you ended up in this heading towards Radio 2, which is a huge audience, but Congo was a little bit heavy musically at that time for what Radio 2 were playing. So we needed Radio 1.5 in this country, and of course it doesn't exist. I think now, if they'd released it now, it would be different, because the radio has changed in recent years, and I think that was an unfortunate situation. Also, we released the album the week Princess Diana died, so we really missed the media boat as well, you know, and that was a big one, because we went to number 2 instead of, we should really, I mean, all their albums go to number 1, it should really have gone into number 1, but the media was obviously swamped with Princess Diana stuff, which was understandable, but bad timing.
But I don't think that's really true.
I think at that time we should have released Shipwrecked or Not About Us, which were two more ballad songs, because the type of radio that were going to play us were, if you like, middle-of-the-road radio stations. And those tracks would have fitted middle-of-the-road radio stations better than something like Congo did. I mean, it's easy to say that with the benefit of hindsight, but I think it would have been a better choice. But I always felt Congo was a terrible choice. I really did. I don't even play it when I do shows because I don't like the song.
Into my heart you came and gave a whole new meaning to my life. Into my world you brought a light. I thought it never would go out.
How can you replace someone like Phil Collins? It's like replacing Mick Jagger at the Stones. It's like, you can't do that, forget it. You just have to bring yourself into a project and do your thing and see how the blend works. And as I say, I think in live performances, the blend worked very well, probably about 80% of the time. And I think there was a few songs that we had to play, like Invisible Touch, which I was really never very good at singing and didn't really like it. The songs like that, the more pop commercial tracks, I just didn't feel them at all. Whereas when we did songs like Carpet Crawlers or Mama or even something like Land of Confusion that was a slightly later track, they worked really well. They were convincing and I could make them my own. But there were certain other songs I just felt I should never have been singing. I wasn't good at them and I knew I wasn't.
I can see you, Mama, but I can hardly wait. Just a touch and to feel you, Mama. Oh, I just can't keep away. In the heat and the steam of the city, oh, it's got me running and I just can't break. So say you help me, Mama, 'cause it's getting so hard.
I find it's quite dangerous to pay attention to the press, especially in a situation like that. I think when I look back on it now, I've noticed once or twice on forums and stuff, real Genesis fans as opposed to the kind of casual listeners. I think it's pretty much 50-50 with people who liked what I brought to the band and people who didn't. I don't resemble in any way, shape or form Phil Collins as a singer or a writer. And what I was going to bring to Genesis was going to make it, I think, more retro. And that doesn't necessarily mean it makes it more commercially popular, but it might make it a little bit more musically interesting to a certain kind of listener. Well, I always loved performing Mama. I mean, Mama was always an interesting song as well, because when I went down to sing in the studio with, for Mike and Tony, so they could listen to what I could do, it was a key moment, without a doubt, whether I could do the laugh. Because if you couldn't, it was game over. You know, you had to do Mama in the set, or for me at least, you had to do it, and it was something that I got off pretty well, and so that particular song, I think Mama is probably my favourite Genesis song of all time, actually. And I mean, there's a lot of great songs as well from, I've kind of been dissing the later stuff because it's more poppy, but there's a lot of great songs on Land of Confusion Invisible Touch too, you know. It just started to, it got to a stage where it was difficult to determine what was Phil's career and what was Genesis at that time. And there was nothing wrong with that musically, because Phil was doing a lot of good stuff, but it seemed to blend it all into one. And I don't know if that was healthy for Genesis, you know. I think it would have been better to have their unique sound. I wasn't involved in the music side of it at all. They basically jammed together, and I believe that was the case when Phil was with them too. They would jam hours and hours and hours of music, and I believe Phil was the best at keeping records on where everything was, where the good ideas were on the cassette or the DAT tape or whatever it was they were recording onto. Mike and Tony did the same thing, sat down and jammed. And they would find moments when something happened, you know, that was quite interesting, and then develop a song from there. My role was to either take melodies they'd written and kind of make them fit the song, or to bring some lyrics along and melodic ideas. Just, I guess, to do what a vocalist does, you know. That was my job. Yeah, that was the process. We sat down, we jammed together. Very weird experience at first. I think the second time we met, they had pieces of music written and no ideas melodically or lyrically, and just said, you know, just sing anything. And I just kind of, you know, la la la, you know, trying to think of what the hell to sing, and eventually, you know, after a few minutes, got a bit of confidence with it and started just throwing words at the music and anything, you know, and subsequently songs started to develop, ideas started to come. And since then, funnily enough, when I've been writing myself, I just did the new Stiltskin album, that's exactly the same process I used. Didn't write anything until I went into the studio and just battered it out. First thing that came into the mind, and then developed from there, and it works very well. You know, it's a good process. If you've got good pieces of music to write to, that is, of course. That's the key.
You're no longer part of my life. I must remind myself again. Too much has happened to us to cause each other pain. It's over now. There's too much guilt we share. Once there would have been a time for talking and learning.
I think the group disbanded because of the American response. To my knowledge, that was the reason. I think that's very unfortunate, I have to say, but it didn't work in America. The record label maybe didn't like it or didn't get behind it or whatever. People didn't buy it, and I think they felt that that should mean the end. And I don't know if it was only America, but you know, I think that was the main contributory factor.
Are we no more than parts in a play? Letting other people, strangers say our lives. Thinking it should come to this. After all these years, what was mine and what should stay behind?
Tony Smith phoned me and said that they decided not to continue. And that was it, really. It was a very brief conversation. And I remember having a conversation with Mike, Tony and Tony Smith, and I think their accountant was there as well on the bus in Italy, which was very near the beginning of the tour, and one of the Italy shows hadn't gone very well because the Italian audience do like the early music very much. It was one of the first markets. I think it was the first market they were ever successful in. And I always remember we did, I think the encore was Invisible Touch and something else, and we didn't really get much of a response to it. So we were a wee little bit despondent. It's the only time it happened, I have to say. But I remember being on the bus from Italy to Switzerland and saying, you know, they were having this kind of private meeting at the back, in which I went to the back of the bus and said, look guys, if you're not going to go through with this, as you said you would, i.e. do a couple of albums, which was the idea, I said, just stop the bus, I'll get off now, you know, because I'm not interested. Of course, I was told that it definitely would go ahead, and well, maybe not. Well, maybe I wasn't told it was definitely going ahead, but I was given the impression that it would. And then, you know, it didn't. And I guess back then they weren't sure, to be honest. But in hindsight, I would, you know, it would have been better getting off the bus, quite frankly, you know, and just, you know, saying I'm not here to be fooled around with. You're either doing it or you're not. But they bottled it. I understand why they made that decision, having had the history they've had, but I think they made the wrong decision. I really do. For them as well, I think they should have continued. It's not as if they're in their 70s, you know, they're still young enough to be knocking out some good music, and I think they should get on with it. Maybe with Phil, you know, and do some new stuff again. Best gig, I remember the best gig, it was the last one. We played in Nuremberg in the stadium there, and it was the Rock im Park festival in Germany. And for me, that was the best gig because it was a magical environment. It was the rain was pouring down, the crowd were all jumping about in the rain, as happens in these situations, and I just feel there's something about that gig that I'll never forget. I just remember thinking, this is it. The band it's really developed its new identity as a band, and I felt it at that moment. And I also felt this is the end. And it wasn't until 18 months later that it actually was officially announced.
I remember long ago, it's when the sun was shining, yes, and the stars were bright, all through the night, and the sound of your laughter as I held you tight, so long ago. So long ago. Oh, oh, oh. I won't be coming home tonight. My generation just put it right.
For many of the original fans, things would never be the same. And as Genesis forged on into the brave new world of sold-out sports stadiums, the old diehards returned to their treasured albums and took solace from an amazing body of work, which is still unsurpassed to this day. Genesis certainly had far greater commercial success in the 80s and 90s, but the 10-year period from 1970 to 1980 will always be looked upon as the creative golden age of a truly great band.
Use them and let's start trying to make it a place worth fighting for. And this is the world we live in, and these are the names that we're given. Stand up and let's start showing just where